I was told by the ambassador to UK it was a blood libel for me to suggest that Israel had killed children.
Now that he's a full-on Palestine supporter, let's see how Piers Morgan gets along with Natasha Hausdorff, an official barrister and international lawyer advocating for international law and Israel.
No, I don't believe that was the case. I think it was to do with targeting children.
No.
And there is a difference.
Right.
Because we are hearing that Israel is targeting children, and that couldn't be further from
Well,
the
last
fact,
week, 9 out of 10 children in one home where 2 doctors reside were killed in an airstrike.
Well,
what was that?
Remarkable.
Well, what was that?
That has been based only on the basis of hearsay.
You don't believe that story?
I want these stories.
Wait a minute. You don't believe that those children were killed?
I have seen conflicting accounts, and I want that story to be properly investigated before the international media runs with it.
You think those 2 parents, one of whom I think operated on one of the children?
I have a question.
You think that those 2 doctors, the parents, they just made it up?
Why are
that
those
9 of their
children
10 children had been blown to pieces by an Israeli airstrike?
If this is true...
You don't believe it?
Well, why on earth was artificially generated imagery used to promote this story when it first happened?
I've got to say, Natasha, I think what you've just said about that family is despicable.
We've seen time
I'm sorry, it's despicable. As somebody, you talk about blood libel, like Dave said, you talk about blood libel, you talk about lies, you talk about promoting propaganda, and here you sit here as a lawyer and you say that you do not believe those 9 children were killed.
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth.
Do you believe it or not?
I said that there were conflicting accounts and it needs to be investigated.
Do you believe it?
I thought you would be
the parents said 9 of their 10 children were killed. Do you believe them or not? Or did those 2 doctors make it up?
They haven't said that directly as far as I have seen. I have seen second-hand accounts and hearsay, but it's important to ask, why are these civilians still there?
Is she hinting at get them out of Gaza? Let the Palestinians out of Gaza and never let them back in?
Why is it that
it's important to ask whether you believe that family have lost 9 of their 10 children.
I want to know why the international community...
You don't. And this goes to the point that I would say about Israel generally now, in this war now. Israel says they don't believe anything. Every story that comes out about the deaths of civilians in Gaza, someone will pop up representing the Israeli government saying, it's propaganda, it's not true, I've heard it's not right, I've heard it didn't happen.
This guy here, Dave Smith, is a Jewish comedian who is very outspoken in favour of Palestine. He's also a friend of Joe Rogan, and he is the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. So Natasha didn't get a very warm welcome on this show, especially now that Piers Morgan is a full-on Palestine supporter. But someone who does agree with Natasha is Barry Tigay, and he's a retired psychologist and an entrepreneur, and he shared this clip from Natasha. Israel is not occupying Arab lands. It never was. This is an interesting term, Arab lands.
Critical rule of customary international law that determines the borders of newly emerging states at their moment of independence. It is called uti possidetis juris. It's applied universally wherever there is no agreement to the contrary. So it's the default rule. And in Israel's case, in 1948, it determined that the pre-existing administrative lines of the British mandate that preceded the State of Israel became Israel's international borders when it declared independence.
Okay, that doesn't seem to be what Encyclopedia Britannica says. And here's UN Resolution 181.
This is the rule that the pre-existing administrative lines become the new lines, the new borders of the state. And the reason that it was introduced was to promote stability and certainty.
But there was meant to be 2 states declared. You could equally say that it was all Palestine, couldn't you?
And to prevent fratricidal struggles. The International Court of Justice outlined these justifications for it when it recognised that it had become established. It was introduced in the 19th century, applied in South America with the withdrawal of the Spanish. It's applied in Asia and Africa, also to the dissolution of the former communist federations. Ukraine's borders followed uti possidetis juris. And that's quite a critical comparison, because I think the 3 of us would agree that Russia has been in occupation of Crimea from Ukraine.
Well, Crimea was historically part of Russia. It was given to Ukraine during the Soviet Union in the 1950s, even more recently than the creation of Israel.
Why is that? Because Crimea was part of Ukraine according to the rule of uti possidetis juris at Ukraine's formation. Well, in the same way, when Israel came into existence, the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza fell within that territory of the administrative lines of the pre-existing British mandate.
Well, that's great. If everyone who lives there is part of the country, give them all equal citizenship, give them all a passport, give them all the right to vote. The only problem is it wouldn't be a Jewish majority. So how are you going to have a democratic state and a so-called Jewish state? It would have to be a state for everyone.
Now, that's critical, because immediately in this war of annihilation that I've described, Jordan occupies the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Israel, and Egypt occupies Gaza. And that occupation ended in 1967 when Israel recovered that territory. That's when this allegation of occupation for many people is dated from. The problem with that is you cannot occupy what is already your own sovereign territory.
I.e., if Ukraine was to retake Crimea and hold it, no one would say that was occupation of Crimea.
From Russia, yes. Indeed.
Right, okay.
And that is a stark parallel comparison. Now, what Israel did in 1967 is it applied its law, administration and jurisdiction in full over East Jerusalem. It reunited the city, but it didn't do so in the West Bank. Instead, it applied a temporary framework. Why? Because under the Land for Peace formula, it expected that it would give up some of the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, to Jordan in pursuit of peace. But when the 1994 peace agreement with Jordan finally came about, Jordan didn't want anything to do with the West Bank. So this temporary administrative framework that Israel established in 1967 held until the Oslo Accords and the creation of areas A, B, and C that we've described. But the application of this term occupation it's another blood libel, because it has no basis in international law. It is used as a political term. And the preface to it, this illegal occupation, which is so often referred to, is also only ever applied to Israel.
Looks pretty illegal to me. One of the illegal activities going on in the West Bank under the occupation are the settlements, the racial colonies, civilian population transplanted into war-won land. Illegal under international law.
There is no concept of illegal, a broader concept of illegal occupation in international law. And in all the instances, situations of real occupation in the context of which is envisaged by the Geneva Conventions, and the context of, the real transfer of populations in Cambodia, Vietnam, in Nagorno-Karabakh.
So Nagorno-Karabakh, also known as Artsakh, is the ethnic Armenian enclave that was ethnically cleansed by Azerbaijan, and Israel helped them to do it. Israel are Azerbaijan's biggest ally. They provided them with weapons. They provided them with drones. Israel is complicit in the crimes in Nagorno-Karabakh. Don't get me started on Nagorno-Karabakh. If I were an Israel supporter, I would not bring that up as an example.
In northern Cyprus.
That's great. She's brought up Cyprus. There was actually a landmark case in 1977 where the Cypriot government compared Turkey's occupation of northern Cyprus with the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, and the UN declared both to be unlawful.
None of these cases has this allegation of illegal occupation, or illegal settlements even, been advanced. So this is another example of a modern blood libel being deployed against Israel.
It's all just a blood libel, apparently. Let me know in the comments, is she correct? Is any criticism of Israel merely a blood libel?